That yard you just saw cost under $200 to plant. It hasn't been replanted in 3 years. No landscape or no weekend watering schedule, no annual trips to the garden center hoping something survives. 15 specific perennials did all of that, and they come back every single year on their own. By the end of this video, you will have a complete zone-matched planting system built from those exact 15 plants, organized into 3 layers that work together to fill your yard with color from spring through fall without demanding anything from you in return. Beautiful yards are not built with big budgets or gardening talent. They are built with the right plant choices made once. If you want more low-maintenance gardening strategies like this one, subscribe now. New videos go up every week. Plant number 1 starts right now. Plant number 1 is creeping phlox, botanical name Phlox subulata, hardy in zones 3 through 9. If you have a slope, a rocky edge, or a stretch of bare ground that nothing else wants to grow in, this is the plant that fixes it permanently. Every April and May, creeping phlox blooms so densely that the foliage disappears completely beneath a solid carpet of pink, purple, lavender, or white flowers. You cannot see the leaves. You only see color, wall to wall, edge to edge. Early season bees find it before almost anything else is open. One $8 plant spreads 2 feet every year and never needs to be replanted. The next plant does something similar at ground level, but it works in the one place creeping phlox cannot. If you want that same ground level coverage working for you in the shade, the next plant changes everything. Plant number 2 is ajuga, also called bugleweed, botanical name Ajuga reptans, hardy in zones 3 through 9. Every yard has at least one problem corner, the dark patch under a tree where the soil is full of roots and nothing survives. Ajuga was built for exactly that spot. It spreads through surface runners, and 3 $6 plants will fill a large shaded bed completely within 2 seasons without a single intervention from you. The foliage runs deep bronze to rich purple depending on the cultivar, which means it adds color to that shaded corner, even in months when nothing is blooming. $18, permanent coverage, 0 replanting. The next plant survives conditions that would kill almost everything else on this list. Now, if your yard gets brutal summer heat and you have lost plants to drought before, the next one was built for exactly that. Plant number 3 is sedum, commonly called stone crop. Zones 3 through 10, the widest hardiness range of any plant on this list. Low-growing sedum varieties form a dense, weed-suppressing mat at ground level and store water inside their thick, fleshy leaves. That internal water reservoir means this plant can go weeks without rain during a summer drought and still look completely healthy while everything around it is struggling. In late summer, flat clusters of pink flowers open across the entire planting and draw in butterflies at a time when almost nothing else in the garden is still blooming. $5 to $8 per plant, 0 supplemental watering from year 2 onward. Productive for 15 to 20 years. The next plant smells like vanilla and takes over shaded woodland floors in a single season. If you have a shaded area under trees where the soil stays cool and slightly moist, the next plant turns it into a lush woodland carpet. Plant number 4 is sweet woodruff, botanical name Galium odoratum, hardy in zones 4 through 8. This is the plant for the deepest shade in your yard, the spots under dense canopy, where even ajuga thins out and gives up. Sweet woodruff spreads through gentle underground runners and fills those areas with a fine, bright green, low-growing mat that stays tidy without any cutting or edging. Tiny white flowers appear in spring and attract early pollinators. Here is the fact most gardeners never know. When the leaves dry, they release a strong scent of vanilla and fresh hay, so strong that they were historically tucked into linen to keep it fragrant. $7 per plant. The ground layer is now complete and the weeds underneath it are finished. Now it is time to talk about the plants that give your yard its color from May through October. Plant number 5 is coneflower, botanical name Echinacea purpurea, hardy in zones 3 through 9. This is where your yard's mid-height color layer begins and coneflower earns its place at the front of that list. From July through September, the months when most gardens go flat and colorless, coneflower holds large, electric pink to magenta blooms on upright stems that stand without staking and never need deadheading to keep performing. Bees and butterflies land on it constantly, but here is what most gardeners do not realize. After the petals drop, the seed heads stand through winter and goldfinches feed on them from October through December. This plant feeds wildlife across 3 full seasons. $6 to $10 per plant, blooms reliably for 10 to 15 years, and from year 2 onward it asks for nothing in return. If you want that golden color showing up earlier in the season, the next plant picks up exactly where spring ends. Plant number 6 is Black-Eyed Susan, botanical name Rudbeckia fulgida. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. If coneflower owns the late summer, Black-Eyed Susan owns the weeks just before it, bridging the gap between your spring bloomers finishing and your late summer plants hitting their peak. Golden yellow daisy flowers with dark chocolate centers open from midsummer and keep going well into fall. It tolerates poor soil and handles part shade better than most yellow blooming perennials. Now here's the detail that separates this plant from everything else on this list in terms of pure value. It self-seeds modestly into surrounding beds, which means one plant quietly becomes 5 within 3 seasons, and you pay nothing for the expansion. Natural-looking drifts of golden yellow that spread on their own fill empty spaces on their own and return every year without replanting. $5 to $9 to start, and it expands from there indefinitely. Now, if you want bees in your garden from late spring through fall, the next plant is one of the most effective pollinator magnets on this entire list.
Before we continue, can I say something really quickly? I don't usually do this, but I see him every day. I see how hard he works, filming in the sun, taking care of everything, and then staying up at night editing, just to make these videos for you. He really puts his heart into this, but most people watching haven't subscribed yet, and I won't lie. That part hurts a little, so if this video has ever made you smile or given you a moment of peace, please take a second to subscribe and maybe share it with someone you care about. You might make their day too. Thank you. Truly. Okay, I'll let him continue.
Plant number 7 is catmint, botanical name Nepeta, hardy in zones 3 through 8. From late spring through summer, catmint produces continuous spikes of lavender blue flowers on soft mounding growth that spreads 2 to 3 feet wide and covers itself so completely in bloom that the foliage almost disappears. Bees find it immediately and return to it daily throughout the season. It is strongly resistant to deer and rabbit damage because of its herbal scent, which means it holds its ground in yards where other plants get destroyed. Here's the practical trick that changes how this plant performs. Cut it back hard after the first bloom flush in June. Within 4 to 6 weeks, a second wave of flowers emerges in August and blooms straight through until frost. 2 full bloom seasons from one plant, $6 to $10, returns and expands for 15 years without intervention. Some perennials last a decade. The next one lasts a lifetime. Plant number 8 is the daylily, botanical name Hemerocallis, hardy in zones 3 through 9. This is the plant with the deepest track record of any perennial in the American backyard garden, and it earned that reputation by being genuinely indestructible once established. Empty sunny beds with poor soil, heavy clay, dry spells, neglect. Daylilies handle all of it without complaint. Each individual flower only lasts 1 day, which sounds like a flaw, until you understand that a mature clump produces dozens of blooms in continuous sequence across 4 to 6 weeks of summer. And every 3 to 4 years, the clump gets large enough to divide, which means you pull it apart and plant the divisions elsewhere in the yard, filling new beds at 0 cost. $6 to $12 for the original plant, and it produces flowers reliably for 20 to 30 years. If you want something that makes people slow down when they drive past your yard, the next plant delivers that every single year. Plant number 9 is perennial salvia, botanical name Salvia nemorosa, hardy in zones 4 through 8. If curb appeal is part of what you are building, this is your most important plant. Dense, vertical spikes of intense violet, purple, or blue rise above tidy, compact foliage and create the kind of clean, designed look that makes a front yard border look intentional and professional rather than random. It solves the problem of flat, shapeless garden beds that have color but no structure. Plant it in drifts of 3 or 5 for maximum visual impact from the street. Here is the detail that doubles its value. Cut the spent flower spikes back in midsummer, and a second bloom emerges in late summer, often stronger than the first. Drought-tolerant and deer-resistant once established. $6 to $12 per plant, performs for 8 to 12 years. Color is one thing, but if you want movement in your garden, actual hummingbirds visiting every single day, the next plant is the one. Plant number 10 is bee balm, botanical name Monarda, hardy in zones 4 through 9. A yard full of blooming plants is beautiful. A yard full of blooming plants with hummingbirds moving through them every morning is something else entirely. Bee balm is what creates that experience. The distinctive, shaggy flower heads in red, pink, and magenta are specifically shaped to accommodate hummingbird feeding, and established plants attract them reliably from the moment the flowers open. In midsummer, but the statistic that stops most people, a single established clump of bee balm can attract 30 or more bee species across one summer, making it one of the most ecologically productive plants available to a home gardener at any price. It spreads gradually through underground runners to form natural colonies that expand the pollinator habitat across your entire bed. $7 to $12, spreads and blooms for 10 to 15 years. Now we move into the plants that do something remarkable. They actually prefer neglect. Starting with one that thrives where almost nothing else will. Plant number 11 is yarrow, botanical name Achillea millefolium, hardy in zones 3 through 9. Most gardeners have a spot they have given up on. The area near the driveway, the south-facing slope that bakes in full afternoon sun, the sandy corner where the soil holds no moisture. Yarrow is the plant that goes into that spot and performs beautifully while everything else declines. It thrives in poor, rocky, dry, fully exposed conditions and actually weakens in rich soil with too much water. Flat-topped flower clusters in yellow, white, pink, salmon, or deep red open from early summer and hold for months. The fern-like foliage adds fine texture to the bed even in the weeks between bloom cycles. Butterflies use the flat flower heads as landing platforms and feed across the entire cluster. Here is the history that makes this plant more interesting than it looks. Yarrow has been used medicinally for wound healing across multiple cultures for over 3,000 years. $5 to $9, spreads modestly, blooms for 10 to 15 years. We have covered the ground. We have covered the color. Now we are going tall. And the next 3 plants are the ones that make your entire yard feel designed. Plant number 12 is Russian sage, botanical name Perovskia atriplicafolia, hardy in zones 4 through 9. When a garden bed lacks scale, when everything sits at the same height and the whole space feels flat, Russian sage is the fix. It grows 3 to 4 feet tall with an open, airy structure, silvery green aromatic stems, and long vertical spikes of tiny lavender blue flowers that bloom from midsummer through fall and create a soft haze of silver and blue above everything planted in front of it. It is deer-proof, pest-free, and the stems are rigid enough that it never needs staking. Here is the fact most people do not know. Russian sage is not actually a sage and has no connection to Russia. It is native to Central Asia and belongs to the mint family, which is exactly why it is so drought-tolerant and aromatic. $8 to $15, blooms for 10 to 15 years and provides structural presence in the bed across every season. Russian sage gives your yard scale, but the next plant gives it legacy. Plant number 13 is the peony, botanical name Paeonia lactiflora, hardy in zones 3 through 8. There is no spring-blooming perennial in the American garden that competes with a mature peony. The flowers are enormous, layered, and deeply fragrant, white, pink, coral, and red depending on the cultivar, and they appear for roughly 3 weeks in late spring in a display that makes every other plant in the yard step back. One plant becomes the centerpiece of the entire garden for those 3 weeks every year. Here is what makes the peony unlike anything else on this list. Established peonies have been documented returning year after year from the same original root planting for over a century. One planting, 100 years of flowers. One critical rule: the pink root eyes must be buried no more than 2 inches below the soil surface. Plant them too deep, and the plant will grow but refuse to bloom for years. $15 to $35 bare root. Blooms reliably for 50 years or more. A peony can outlive the gardener who planted it. The next plant grows as tall as your fence and feeds butterflies by the hundred. Plant number 14 is Joe Pye weed, botanical name Eutrochium purpureum, hardy in zones 4 through 9. By late summer, most perennial gardens are winding down. The spring bloomers are long finished. The midsummer plants are fading. Joe Pye weed is the plant that fills that gap with something dramatic rather than just letting the season end quietly. It grows 6 to 8 feet tall, taller than most garden fences, and produces large domed clusters of dusty rose to mauve flowers that open in August and carry through September. Monarch butterflies, swallowtails, and dozens of other species cover the flower clusters from the day they open. It tolerates moist soil and part shade, which makes it one of the few tall perennials that works in the low-wet areas of a yard where nothing else gets tall enough to matter. $8 to $14 requires zero maintenance once established. Blooms and spreads for 15 to 20 years. We have one plant left, and it blooms from May through October, longer than almost anything else we have covered today. Plant number 15 is tall garden phlox, botanical name Phlox paniculata, hardy in zones 4 through 8. Most modern yards have lost something that older gardens had automatically: fragrance. The smell of a garden on a warm summer evening that carries across the entire yard without walking up to any individual plant. Tall garden phlox brings that back. It grows 2 to 4 feet tall with large, rounded flower clusters in white, pink, lavender, red, and bicolor combinations that open in midsummer and hold through early fall. The fragrance is strong, sweet, and carries on the evening air in a way that no other plant on this list approaches. Butterflies and hummingbirds find it throughout the bloom season. Modern, mildew-resistant cultivars have solved the one weakness older varieties carried, so the plant that your grandmother struggled with performs cleanly in today's gardens. $8 to $14, blooms reliably for 10 to 15 years, 15 plants, 3 layers, 1 complete garden system. Here is how it all connects. Here is what you actually built across those 15 plants. The ground layer, creeping phlox, ajuga, sedum, and sweet woodruff, eliminates bare soil completely. No bare soil means no room for weeds to establish, which means less work from the first season onward and every season after it. The mid-height layer, coneflower, black-eyed Susan, catmint, daylily, salvia, bee balm, and yarrow, sequences color from May through October, so something is always in bloom. Not occasionally, continuously. The tall layer, Russian sage, peony, Joe Pye weed, and tall garden phlox gives the entire bed structure, scale, and fragrance while pulling pollinators down through every layer beneath them. Every plant on this list was chosen to fill a specific role in that system. The total cost to plant all 15 from quality starter plants sits under $200. One landscaping crew visit costs more than that and produces nothing that returns next year. This system returns for 20 to 30 years from a single planting season. Now here is where you start, even if you have never planted a perennial before. Phase 1 is the ground layer. Before anything else goes in, choose your ground level spreaders based on your light conditions. Sunny slopes and edges get creeping phlox and low sedum. Shaded corners under trees get ajuga and sweet woodruff. These 4 plants go in first because they eliminate the bare soil problem that makes every other planting harder to maintain. Phase 2 is the color layer. Once the ground is covered, add 3 to 4 mid-height bloomers matched to your USDA hardiness zone. Check your zone before you buy. This is where most beginners waste money. A plant rated for zones 5 through 9 will not survive a zone 4 winter no matter how well you plant it. Phase 3 is the tall anchors. Place 1 or 2 at the back of the bed. After the ground layer is established, 3 mistakes to avoid across all 3 phases. Buying outside your zone, planting tall anchors into bare, unprotected soil, and watering first-year perennials like they are already established. They are not yet. Give them 1 full season before you walk away. Every one of these 15 plants will come back next spring without you doing a single thing to make it happen. That is not a small thing. Most of what we spend money on in our yards disappears. The annuals that die, the mulch that washes out, the flowers that bloom for 3 weeks and leave nothing behind. These plants stay. They expand. They get better every year instead of needing to be replaced. You are not just planting a garden. You are making a decision once that your yard rewards you for across the next 2 or 3 decades of your life. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 15 plants surprised you most, or tell me which layer you are starting with first. I read every single one. If this video was useful, subscribe now, because next week we are covering the 7 fastest spreading perennials that will fill an empty bed in a single season. The garden is yours.